A very good morning, dear friends. So, in the last class, I have uploaded a PowerPoint presentation and also a few videos, and I hope you all went through the presentation and the videos because today's session is a continuation of last uh, class where I have uploaded all these notes. So, in today's session, we'll be focusing on film language or language of cinema. Just like any other art form, film also has its own language to communicate its meaning. And the language of cinema is different from the other modes of visual culture. Film we know has a range of significance in our world. So visual literacy is needed as film language is important historically, technically, and socially. Film usually employs the language of storytelling. The signs, the symbols, the frames, they act as different codes used by the filmmaker in order to convey meaning to the audience. And along with these elements of signs, symbols, and frames, the filmmakers they also use computer generated special effects, kinetic action sequence, and intensified soundtracks, which add pleasure while watching a film. Film is all about, or it is a camera frame that actually determines what you see and how you see the objects and the events within the camera frame and the entire process of editing they convey both denotative as well as connotative meaning. Denotative we know the literal meaning, and connotative is the contextual or the implied meaning. So all these objects and the events within the frame and the process of editing. And according to Martin Scorsese, the history of the language of cinema started with the very first cut. Cutting out editing adds meaning as it assembles various random shots into a coherent one. So everything on the screen, the lighting, the shadows, the size of the shot, the camera angle, the composition, the colors, all these are like a spoken word to the audience. And understanding film language is an experience, and many filmmakers they have their own dialects. For example, if you're going to watch a film directed by Amal Neerad or Satyan Andikar, you know what is to be expected from that movie. I'm sorry. Or for example, film directed by Sanjay Leela Bhansali, a film directed by Karan Johar, or one by Christopher Nolan. So we know what is to be expected from a movie directed by this particular director. So editing or cutting is of paramount importance because it adds meaning to film. And it was Lev Kuleshov who proposed the idea that each camera shot works as the letters of the alphabet, and we can decipher the meaning only if we know the you know uh, meaning of these individual shots, or only if we assemble these individual shots into a coherent one. പ്രോപ്പറായിട്ട് എഡിറ്റ് ചെയ്യാത്ത അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പ്രോപ്പറായിട്ട് ഷോർട്സ് അസംബിൾ ചെയ്തില്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിൻ്റെ ഡിസൈർഡ് മീനിങ് ഓഡിയൻസിലേക്ക് കൺവേ ചെയ്യപ്പെടില്ല. സോ ഈച്ച് ക്യാമറ ഷോട്ട് ഇസ് ലൈക്ക് ലെറ്റേഴ്സ് ഓഫ് ദി ആൽഫബറ്റ്. And Christian Metz, he proposed the theory of language sans language. According to Metz, the language of film is not drawn from a concrete or a fixed language structure. And that is what he actually meant by this language sans language, a language without a language system. And cinema is a complex language. Film employs a complex language with its own grammar, which cannot be analyzed just as we analyze any other verbal language. So remember this about the language of cinema or film language. Film employs the language of storytelling and how the objects within the frame and the process of editing, they add meaning to one particular shot. So there is a blending or of many factors, or there are many factors that add meaning to cinema. For example, the personality traits of a filmmaker and the technical and mechanical parameters. All these add meaning to cinema. Uh, and this actually explains the importance of arrangement of imagery in films, or what can be termed as film language. It is very, very important how to place things in proper order in order to get the desired meaning. So, apart from the personality traits of the filmmaker and the technical and mechanical parameters, apart from the personality traits of the filmmaker, the technical and mechanical parameters include mise-en-scene, cinematography, editing, and sound. Film language is determined by these four factors: mise-en-scene, cinematography, editing, and sound. Mise-en-scene, we know, is a French term that can be easily translated into putting on stage, or simply staging, or placed on stage. This is the meaning of the French term mise-en-scene. Earlier the term was used in theatre, and later it came to be widely used in film studies to signify the film production practices that are involved in the framing of shots. So mise-en-scene is the totality or combination of setting, costume, lighting, landscape within the frame of a shot. And some people say that even the movements within the camera are also part of mise-en-scene. So these aspects of mise-en-scene, the setting, costume, lighting, props and action, the ambience of the landscape, the movements within the camera, all these are together known as or described as pro-filmic elements. They are known as pro-filmic because they exist prior to and independent of actual filming or camera activity. ഇത് ക്യാമറ ആക്ടിവിറ്റിക്ക് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആക്ച്വൽ ഫിലിമിന് പുറത്ത് നിൽക്കുന്നതാണ്, അല്ലെ അതിന് മുന്നേ എക്സിസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നതാണ്. Setting, costume, lighting, props and action, the landscape or the ambience and movements within the camera, and so they are known as pro-filmic elements. Now, the French theorist and philosopher André Bazin, in his essay The Evolution of the Language of Cinema, advocates that film transfers the real world into the screen. Film transfers the real world into the screen. We know the difference between the real world and the real, REEL, the real world that we see on the screen. So, this palpable manifestation, this transferring of the real world into the screen, is achieved through mise-en-scene. And Christian Metz, he identified 5 channels of information. And according to Metz, the 5 channels of information are the visual image, the print and other graphics, speech, music, and noise or sound effect. And visual images are interpreted differently in different cultures. And the culturally derived codes and the artistic codes are very vital to the language of cinema. And color, line, form, all these actually form a part of the visual code. And the most efficient tool for the filmmaker to modify these visual codes is lighting. Regarding lighting, again, we'll see more to that, the kind of lighting that is used in cinema. So ഇതാണ് mise-en-scene എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഫ്രഞ്ച് ടേമാണ് അതിൻ്റെ മീനിങ് പുട്ടിങ് ഇൻ ടു ദ സീൻ ഓർ സ്റ്റേജിങ്. നമ്മളൊരു ക്യാമറയിലൂടെ നോക്കുമ്പോൾ സ്റ്റേജിൽ എന്തൊക്കെ കാണുന്നു എന്നുള്ള എല്ലാ ആസ്പെക്ട്സും മിസോൺസെനിൽ വരുന്നതാണ്. And the transferring of the real world into the screen, the palpable manifestation that is achieved through mise-en-scene. The elements of mise-en-scene are settings, costume, lighting, props and action, and also the entire ambience of the landscape, the movements within the camera. These elements are together known as pro-filmic, as they exist prior to the um, actual filming. Then the five channels of information according to Christian Metz: visual image, print and other graphics, speech, music, noise and sound effects. And how various codes are used in film, like the some are culturally derived, some are artistic codes, and there are also certain visual codes. The visual codes are color, line and form, and the visual code is achieved through lighting. I hope you have got a fair idea about what is meant by mise-en-scene, because this is going to be the word that you're going to hear throughout the semester whenever we deal with film studies, or whenever you watch a video or read any book that is related to film studies. I'm sure that you will come across this particular word, mise-en-scene. So the first element of mise-en-scene, that is setting. Setting, we know, since we deal with literature, we know it refers to the historical period or the geographical region which actually form the backdrop of the narrative. And setting can be exterior or interior, which is actually determined by the story, the cost, and the practicality, whether the setting should be exterior or interior. And film setting can be again very narrow, sometimes very expansive or splendid, artificial, can be natural, and these the setting, they shouldn't be seen as a mere backdrop to action, because it creates a sense of place and mood to the narrative. And the setting is functional in sorry the setting is functional in substantiating the narrative or the story. It also reveals the genre of the film, and it throws light upon the psychological conditions of characters. When you just watch a trailer of a movie like Kayangalam Kochuni, or when you just see a shot of the movie, the entire setting is quite clear to you. The historical period or the geographical region or the entire mode of the narrative, all these are very clear. Just if we look at the setting of the movie, the genre that is revealed, whether the movie is a road movie or it is a historical movie, whether it is a comedy or a tragedy. So it is very clear from the setting. Now, moving on to the second element, that is costume, something that we at times look for in while watching a film. And sorry. Um, so costume includes clothing, makeup, and hairstyle of actors. Earlier, there were much attention was not given to this aspect of costume, but later, uh, the filmmakers and the critics, they realized the importance of clothing, because clothing at times it acts as a powerful pointers of national identity, class allegiance, gender positions, and also the emotional and psychological states of actors, along with the film genre, is revealed through the costume. If we see this particular movie, Bahubali, just to look at the characters and their costume, their clothing, their makeup, and their hairstyle, we are quite clear about the genre to which it belongs. A look at the costume shows their national identity, their class allegiance, their gender position, the emotional psychological states of the actors, all these are revealed through costume. So costume has also got a performative aspect. It is an influential aspect of the narrative, and it has a performative aspect because at times the costume acts, and costume was seen as a signifier by Roland Barthes. It was Barthes who said that clothing is a signifier with corresponding signifieds or meanings that will determine the identity, status, and power. Now, moving on to the third one, that is lighting. So, regarding lighting used in film, there is this customary lighting that was used during the classical Hollywood cinema. That is the three-point lighting. Three-point lighting is a very common and one of the important lightings that is used in cinema. So, in cinema, lighting refers to any illuminating source, any source of illumination, which can include even a small lamp or a big beam of light. ഒരു ചെറിയ മൺചിരാത് തൊട്ടൊരു വലിയ beam of light വരെ നമുക്ക് ലൈറ്റിംഗിൽ ഇൻക്ലൂഡ് ചെയ്യാവുന്നതാണ്. So, in cinematography, lighting is the main source of illumination, and we have this three-point lighting where we have key light, fill light, and backlight. Key light is the main source of illumination, and fill light illuminates shadows cast by the key light. And then we have backlight. Backlight illuminates the subject or the character from behind and above. ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു മൂന്ന് പോയിന്റ് ഡിഫറെൻറ്റ് ലൈറ്റിങ്സ് ആണ് സിനിമയിൽ പൊതുവേ നമ്മൾ കാണുക. കീ പോയിന്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് മെയിൻ സോഴ്സ് ഓഫ് ലൈറ്റിംഗ്. ഫിൽ ലൈറ്റ്, കീ ലൈറ്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഷാഡോനെ ഇല്യൂമിനേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നു. ബാക്ക് ലൈറ്റ് ഇല്യൂമിനേറ്റ്സ് ദ ക്യാരക്ടർ ഫ്രം ബിഹൈൻഡ് ആൻഡ് ഫ്രം above. So we'll watch the two videos given here as link at the end of the class. That will give you a very clear idea about the three-point lighting system that is used in cinema. And other than the three-point lighting system, there is also along with the key light, there is this high key light. High key light denotes a brilliantly lit scene with minimal shadow, and a bright and dominant key light, which is used mostly in musicals and comedies. കീ ലൈറ്റിൽ തന്നെയുള്ളതാണ് ഹൈ കീ ലൈറ്റും ലോ കീ ലൈറ്റും. ഹൈ കീ ലൈറ്റിൽ വളരെ ബ്രില്യൻ്റ്ലി ലിറ്റ് സീനായിരിക്കും യൂഷ്വലി നമ്മൾ മ്യൂസിക്കൽസിലും കോമഡീസിലൊക്കെ കാണുന്നത് ഈ ഹൈ കീ ലൈറ്റാണ്. Then low key light is there, that is the chiaroscuro, which involves illumination towards the darker end and less brighter key light, producing a scene with a good deal of shadow. കൂടുതൽ ഒരു ഷാഡോ ബേസ്. ചിയാറോസ്കുറോ നിങ്ങൾക്കറിയാം, ആ ഒരു ഷാഡോ പെയിൻറ്റിങ്ങിലും ഇതിലൊക്കെ വിഷ്വലിലൊക്കെ വരുന്നതിനാണ് ചിയാറോസ്കുറോ എന്ന് പറയുക. സോ ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് ദ low key lighting. Will once you watch the videos, the entire lighting will be very, very clear. Now moving on to the last one, that is props and acting. Props or the deco stands for objects of varying dimensions that appear on the screen. What all things that appear on the screen? It can be called as props or decor. And theorists like Andre Bazin and Siegfried Kracauer, they stand for a realistic presentation of props or things as they really exist in the material world, whereas some other theorists, critics, they endorse props with other non-realistic meanings. അപ്പോൾ രണ്ട് രീതിയിൽ റിയലിസ്റ്റിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള പ്രസൻറ്റേഷൻ ഉണ്ട്, സംടൈംസ് നോൺ റിയലിസ്റ്റിക് പ്രസൻറ്റേഷൻ ഓഫ് ദീസ് പ്രോപ്സ് ഓൺ സ്റ്റേജ്. And the props play an informational role with respect to the character. It provides more information about a character, and also regarding the socio-economic occupational status of the character is revealed through the prop. And it also has got symbolic power. Sometimes props take an expressionistic or a symbolic power. Then moving on to the next one, that is acting. Acting or performance is the entire repertoire of on-screen facial expressions, gestures, positions, movement, and speech. ആക്ടറിൻ്റെ ആ പെർഫോമൻസിൻ്റെ എല്ലാ ആസ്പെക്ട്സും, ഫേഷ്യൽ എക്സ്പ്രഷൻസ് ആകാം, ജെസ്റ്റേഴ്സ്, പൊസിഷൻസ്, ഹൗ ഹി പൊസിഷൻസ് ഹിംസെൽഫ്, മൂവ്മെൻറ്റ്, സ്പീച്ച്, all these together uh, commander acting. And it was Walter Benjamin who came with this idea that a film actor is a ghostly figure because he survives minimally in the two-dimensional screen image and is completely derived of the existence is completely deprived of bodily presence or aura. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് അദ്ദേഹത്തെ ഒരു ghostly figure ആയിട്ട് വിളിക്കുന്നത്. Again, there are two different kinds of acting, method acting and non-method acting, the two common styles of performance in modern cinema. Method acting is also known as naturalistic acting, and non-method acting is known as stylized acting. In the method actor, the character or the actor, he becomes one with the character, completely or blindly following the mannerisms, the dress, and the culture of the character. Whereas in non-method or stylized acting, the actors, they overact, they exaggerate certain characteristic features, they tend to dramatize things, sometimes according to the direction by the director, or sometimes for some comic or dramatic effect. So these are the two different styles of performance, the method acting and the non-method acting. Then is one of the factors that add meaning to cinema. The other factors being cinematography, editing, and sound. So don't forget this. This is very, very significant because we are dealing with the language of cinema. So film employs the language of storytelling. Everything that is on the screen conveys meaning to the audience. And these are some of the factors that add meaning: mise-en-scene, cinematography, editing, and sound. Mise-en-scene is staging or placing on the stage, and these are the elements within the mise-en-scene: settings, costume, lighting, props, and action. Setting is the historical period or the geographical region. Costume has clothing, makeup, and hairstyle that has got implications of national identity, class allegiance, and gender position. Lighting, the very important commonly used 3-point lighting, and props and acting. So don't forget this. And along with these four important elements, the ambience within the frame of a shot and the movements within the camera, they also are part of mise-en-scene. So with this, I wish to stop today's session because if we move to the other elements like cinematography, um, editing, and sound, that would be too heavy. So we'll deal with the other three factors: cinematography, editing, and sound in the next class. So I hope things are clear to you, and please don't forget to watch the two videos too. Thank you.
Hey, what's up everybody? In this video, I'm going to show you how to make your images go from looking like this to this. And the only thing I changed was the lighting. Lighting is one of the key elements to creating cinematic images and is one of the biggest factors that separates amateur looking films from professional looking films. Now, I recently saw a post on the Facebook group of one of our members asking, why does my image look flat and washed out, but this image that I pulled off of an ad I just watched looks super cinematic? What are they doing that I'm not doing to get that cinematic look? And the answer is lighting. And we'll talk about how lighting can create depth to make your images look more three-dimensional and cinematic. Now, there are four main characteristics of light that I want to cover: direction, color, quantity, and quality. Now, because there's so much to cover, I'm actually going to split this up into two videos. In this video, part one, we're going to be covering direction of light and briefly talking about light color as well. And then in video two, we'll talk about light quality versus light quantity. First, let's talk about direction of light. Depending on where you position your lights, the shadows will allow you to form different shapes or patterns on your subject. So using a basic 3-point light setup, we're going to go over 5 common lighting patterns and when you'd want to use them. The key light is your main light that is used to light up your subject, and depending on where you place this key light will depend on the look or light pattern that it gives you. The most common placement of a key light is slightly above your subject and about 45 degrees from the camera off to one side. And the reason for this is because it creates shadows on the face, making your subject appear more three-dimensional and thus creating depth to your image. And as we talk about a lot in this course, creating depth is what helps images feel more cinematic and pop out from the screen. Be careful though, not all shadows are good. If you place your light too high, you'll start creating raccoon eyes on your subject. This generally isn't a very flattering look, and it kind of resembles shooting at noonday, which isn't the prettiest lighting to shoot in. But you also don't want to put the light too low, first of all, because light sources don't naturally come from below us, so it doesn't look very natural, but also because it gives you that flashlight around the campfire look that tends to be more of a spooky, scary feel. Plus, it highlights areas that aren't super flattering, like underneath the chin, the nostrils, the eyebrow ridge. So by having the light slightly above your subject, you create a nice drop shadow. Drop shadow meaning the shadow underneath the chin that outlines the jaw, which is typically a more flattering look and helps create dimension and depth. With this key light position, you also have the subject's eyes lit up nicely, which is usually the main part of the face that you want your audience to focus on. And if you look closely, you can actually see the light source's reflection in your subject's eye, and this is called a catch light. Having a strong catch light can help draw your viewer's attention to the subject and gives your subject that sparkle in the eye look. And depending on the shape of your key light, you can get a variety of shapes of catch lights in the eye. For example, if you use a square softbox or a window as your key light, you'll get more of a square catch light. If you're outside shooting and using light reflected off of surrounding objects, then you'll see those reflected objects in the catch light of your subject's eye. So those are just a couple things I look for when lighting my subject to help give them a more cinematic look. Now let's move the position of our key light to show you the 5 different lighting patterns and the effects they each have on your image. As we move the key light directly in front of our subject, we get an even flat look to our image, and this is called flat lighting. Flat lighting on the face will mean that your subject is well lit and you are unable to see any shadows along their face. This will give you the least dramatic look out of the 5 lighting patterns that we'll be talking about, and is often used for a more light-hearted setting like commercials or beauty shots that allow you to see every detail of the skin. This look doesn't give a lot of dimension or depth to your subject though, so isn't necessarily looked at as a more cinematic or dramatic option. Now if we keep the light in the same spot but just raise it up slightly from the flat lighting position, we get what is called the Paramount or butterfly lighting. Paramount refers to Paramount Pictures, who used this as their signature lighting style when it came to shooting their leading actresses. And the word butterfly refers to the little shadow under the nose that the lighting position creates, and is shaped kind of like a butterfly. This lighting pattern is typically a more feminine lighting pattern because when used properly, the shadows will accentuate the cheekbones, creating depth to the face. But be careful with the height of your light on this look, because if you bring it too low, you will lose the drop shadow under the chin, along with the butterfly shadow under the nose, thus going back to a flatter two-dimensional image. And if you raise it too high, the eyebrow ridge will cover up your eyes, giving you raccoon eyes, and your butterfly shadow will start to crawl onto the lip, making for a weird, unwanted shadow on your mouth. But let's now move the light slightly to the side, and you'll start to see that butterfly shadow turn into a side nose shadow. This lighting pattern is referred to as loop lighting because the nose shadow creates the shape of a loop on the cheek. And this lighting pattern is generally used on rounder faces, as the shadows it creates helps the face seem slimmer and longer. And as we continue to move the light farther to the side, about 45 degrees from our camera, that nose shadow connects with the cheek shadow, creating the lighting pattern Rembrandt Lighting. Rembrandt lighting gets its name from a Dutch painter named Rembrandt, who used this lighting pattern for many of his paintings, and this lighting pattern is known for creating a triangle of light on the cheek subject, and is probably the most popular lighting pattern used in Hollywood films, as it creates a dramatic, cinematic, three-dimensional depth to the subject's face. Now with Rembrandt lighting, depending on where you position your camera, you can get different looks as well. If you position your camera on the broader side of your subject, this is called broad light. And if you position your camera on the darker side of your subject, this is called short light or the dark side. And it's most common in cinema to shoot on the short or dark side, as it creates more drama and depth. Now let's move our key light 90 degrees or completely to the side of our subjects, and you'll see the entire side of the face become shadowed. This is called split lighting because it splits the face in half, and this lighting pattern is used to create an even more dramatic look and is also popular in Hollywood films, especially during scenes that are meant to be super dramatic. And where paramount lighting is typically used to create a more feminine look, split lighting tends to make subjects look tougher and more masculine. So as you can see, just with the positioning of our one key light, we can create a wide range of looks and feels to our image. Let's now look at our second light of the 3-point light setup, and that is the backlight, or rim light, or hair light. Backlight because the light lights up the back, or if it's slightly higher it becomes more of a hair light, or if it's more to the side, a rim light. Backlight, as we talk about in the natural lighting video, is commonly used during golden hour when the sun is low in the horizon and starting to set. So by using a backlight, we are replicating that golden hour look. Sources of backlight can oftentimes be practical lights as well, like a window or a lamp or anything in the background that looks natural to help light up the back of your subject. The purpose of backlight or rim light is to create a halo or rim around the outline of your subject. In my setup for this tutorial, I have the backlight positioned about 4 feet above me and pretty much directly behind me. So you can also play with the exact positioning of this light to create slightly different looks. Our third light in our 3-point light setup is the fill light. As the name states, the fill light fills in light, usually on the opposite side of your key light, making your shadows less dramatic. Depending on the mood of your story and or scene, you can choose to use a little or a lot of this fill light. The more fill light you use, the less contrast your image will have, and this is referred to as high key lighting, which is used more in comedies, romances, sitcoms, commercials, beauty shots, etc. It gives a more lighthearted, less dramatic look, whereas when you have less fill light, it creates more contrast, and this is referred to as low key lighting, and is used in more dramatic scenarios and is generally looked at as more cinematic due to the added depth it gives your subject. Now, I rarely use fill light for my setups, but rather I just have my soft key light and the backlight, and if I need any fill, then I use my 5-in-1 reflector. So there you have it. Those are the 3 main lights in a basic 3-point light setup and some of the light patterns that can be created. Be careful though, unless you're going for a pitch black background look, you'll want to make sure you have some light on your background to give your audience some context as to where your subject is. This can either be done by allowing your other lights to spill on the background, or you could add another artificial light, lighting up just the background. And a common lighting pattern that can be created by using background light is called checkerboard lighting, which basically means that you light up the background on the dark side of the subject, but leave the background dark behind the bright side of your subject, creating a checkerboard effect. This method once again is used to create depth by contrasting the light and helping the subject pop from the background. To take it one step further, you can add a gel to your backlight to create some color contrast, which brings me to our second characteristic of light, which is color. All right, that's all I got for you guys today. If you want to see the second half of part 1 and part 2 of cinematic light shaping, then you're gonna have to check it out at fulltimefilmmaker.com. This is where I post all of my exclusive content, and guys, I've had a lot of you asking me, post content weekly, post content daily, and I actually do post weekly content and sometimes daily, but it's all in my Full-Time Filmmaker private community. So if you want exclusive content from me, you want personal attention from me, you want my feedback on some of your videos, then Full-Time Filmmaker is the place to get that. That is where I can give you personalized attention. And if you're not quite ready to join Full-Time Filmmaker, then make sure to check out the free 1-hour filmmaking training, which is basically like a free trial to Full-Time Filmmaker, where I share a bunch of insights from the course. But that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed. If you have any further questions, please let me know.